Welcome back to the channel. Well, I supported a Kickstarter for a thing called Octavi from Germany, and I got it yesterday and unboxed it. Came well packaged in a nice box, very well marked, and opened it up, and it was securely packed in there, although no bubble wrapping or anything, but it seemed to be very secure. In fact, I had to struggle to get it out of the cardboard container. I have to admit it's really well made. It came with the necessary USB-C cable, and as you can see, pretty solidly built. Very nicely built. You can see even torque screws, stainless steel used on the back, and the quality of the injection molding is really nice. It's probably going to be the prettiest thing in my flight simulator. The buttons have a nice feel, and you can see that there's a multicolor printing to mark the functions of the switches, and I'll point that out to you later. You see that little bump in the vertical ridge to help orient yourself when you're using it with a VR, and that's what I'm guessing that's for. Very attractive. Now we're going to test this out in the Sobo Cessna 172 with the G530. Then we'll try it with X-Plane 12. There's a plug-in available for both simulators. So I'm going to show you how these switches work. One thing you'll note is that they are illuminated. So if I touch COM 2, you can see that it illuminates, COM 1 illuminates. Once you select that knob will control COM 1. As you can see, as I turn the main large knob, the whole number changes, and the small knob, and then there's a transfer button to swap those frequencies. Now, one thing that is different is normally if you push that on the G530, it represents the bottom left knob, it would swap it, but it doesn't swap it. You have to hit the button as I've done there. Now you can see that I'm changing the COM on the number 2 GPS or number 2 radio. Again, the swap function works. If we switch to nav 1, you can see the nav 1 frequencies are changing. We can swap that again, and then we'll press nav 2. Then you can see on the number 2 GPS the nav 2 frequency is changing, and of course that swaps also. Now if we hit FMS, the knob becomes the bottom right knob, and in that case it works exactly like the bottom right knob. The large and small knobs, you can see all the functions are available. The press button is a press to cursor, just like on the GPS. Again, once that's selected, all the functions on the right, you can see, are the same as the below the range knob. Those 4 buttons there are on the right. And you can see we can make entries just like we would with the knob. So it's very good training transfer. Now when the FMS buttons are selected, the blue secondary functions for the autopilot across the bottom are match the buttons across the bottom of the GPS units. You can see starting with procedure, VNAV, flight path, flight plan, message, OBS, and CDI. Selecting FMS2 will also allow you to do all the functions on the 430 or the second GPS unit that's installed. I find it's quite easy to use. For example, we can select a procedure, select an approach, select the approach we want, enter vectors for the approach, activate, and we're ready to go. It's that easy. So this is a great tool for learning, especially the GPS 530 and 430. Now when we press the autopilot button, the knobs become altitude and VVI selection, vertical speed selection knobs. And the buttons now are autopilot functions. You can see we turn on the autopilot, we can select heading, nav, approach, vertical speed, and now the knob can adjust the vertical speed that we want for a target. And that's why they call this the world's smallest cockpit. Pressing the autopilot button will disconnect the autopilot, and the only other function that we haven't talked about is the transponder button. Now when we press that, we can use the knobs to set the transponder code, and if we push the button it will toggle to the mode, although that's not working right now. That works on X-Plane but not on Microsoft, but they'll be fixing that shortly. And that allows you to turn the transponder to various modes, altitude and standby, off, and so on. Now if we press the functions, the blue functions, if we press the COM and then press the button on the cursor, now we have a heading select knob, 10 degrees for the big knob and 1 degree for the little knob, and that just toggles with the button on the encoder. So we can press nav, and you can see that once we press nav and press the button, now we're going to be able to set the OBS 1. And again, 10 degrees for the big knob, 1 degree for the little. Press the number 2 nav, and now we're setting the OBS, Omni Bearing Selector, for number 2 VOR. 10 degrees for the big knob, 1 degree for the little knob. Pretty handy. Then when we press those buttons again, they toggle back to their main functions, back to COM or nav frequency selectors. Now the COM2 has a baro function. That again is not working on either X-Plane or Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. But they'll be fixing that shortly. This has just been released. Now the website has pretty thorough information, some downloads for the plugins for different platforms. You can also use a MobiFlight. They have a plugin for that, and that's a lot more flexible. But you can see here it kind of explains the functions of the knobs. And I found it to be a little bit confusing at first, but I think once you get it down, I think it's going to be pretty useful, and certainly better than having to use a mouse or keyboard to control while you're trying to do some training on the GPS system, navigation, and just basic autopilot functions, which is, let's face it, is most of what you do when you're doing some training. Now I'm going to take a quick look at X-Plane and show you the same thing I just showed you. So I'm not going to belabor it. I'm just going to show it in action while I talk about the pros and cons. Now I think this is a fine unit. It's well made and it does what it does very well. My only complaint is that it is slightly limited in what it can do. It's well designed to run the G530 or 430 or the dual and in the simple autopilot, but it doesn't have all the functions that you might have. And I tried using it with the G1000 and it really wasn't that practical. Now it may be possible to modify the buttons using MobiFlight, but right now the standard plugins don't work that well. And the buttons are so nicely labeled that I'd hate to use them on another kind of platform where you have to remember other functions. This is really laid out nicely for the 530, that the buttons along the side and across the bottom fit the GPS exactly. It would really bother me to put little stickers on these buttons because they look so nice. This is really a nice looking piece of kit. It's very well designed. It works well, but as I said, it has limited capabilities. It's really designed for pilots, I would say, who have a minimum setup, just maybe even a laptop or a main screen and a joystick, but want to learn to use the 530 and 430 to learn how to fly, LNAV approaches and so on. And they can use this little piece of equipment very easily, and it's very realistic and it's good. Now, I'm a Knobster fan, and you can buy a Knobster and a touchscreen and Air Manager, and for probably $100 more, you could have a much more flexible setup. But that's not for everyone, and that's a little complicated, and it requires a little deeper level of commitment to flight simulation. But for a person who's a pilot who owns an airplane that has a G530 or 430, wants to become proficient with it, I think this is an excellent training aid, and I would encourage people to buy it because it's certainly well constructed. I really love the Kickstarter concept to allow products to come to market that otherwise would never have the funding to be produced. And this is a perfect example of a really nice product, niche no doubt, but still a very nice product that has good functionality and is well constructed and should give people years of good service. So I say good job for Felix and the team that put this together, and I wish them the best of luck. I believe there's a sign up on their website to add your name for notification when this is ready for general market, and it's Octavi or Octavi, OCTAVI.net, and you can check that out and get on the list for the next batch that's produced. I'm sure the software will just be improving. I'd like to see some support maybe from Air Manager for this product too. And this is the IFR1 model, and I assume there may be an IFR2 or 3 coming, and maybe we'll have some other versions that'll have buttons that'll match the G1000 or some other autopilots and other things. One thing I would like to see is some kind of a stand for this. I think it would be better if it was up at about a 45-degree angle. I think adding a 90-degree adapter to the USB-C like I did here would get the cable out of the way, and it would sit nicely on a desk. And as long as it had a good solid base or was screwed in, it would be perfect. Maybe even have some slots to slide it in and slide it out. Just an idea. These are very functional, easy to transport, and I'm thinking with the Yaw Man that I saw at Flight Sim Expo, that little handheld, looks like a Game Boy controller, but it has throttle, flaps, trim, everything you need to operate a simulator. You take that and you take this and put it in with your laptop, and when you travel you could probably do some flight simming no matter where you are. So I love to see these innovative products hitting the market, and I wish them well. Now, thanks for watching my videos. I appreciate the time that you spend watching them. As you know, I do this strictly for fun, and but I do appreciate encouragement to keep up the videos flowing, and to also get ideas from you about what I can do videos about and how I can improve the videos I do. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I'd love to have your comments. See you on the next video.